Okay, so hello and welcome everybody. My name is Sarah Freeman-Woolpert and I'm the National Field Organizer at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. It's wonderful to have all of you here with us tonight. I'm joined tonight by Ashley Wilson, our Grasstops manager at FCNL, and also by Justin Hurdle, who's our organizing data strategist. Justin will be running tech for us tonight, so we're really grateful to him for keeping the line clear and making sure everything goes really smoothly here on Zoom, our new platform for everything we do. As most of you know, the Friends Committee on National Legislation is a nonpartisan Quaker lobby for peace and justice based on Capitol Hill. And Ashley and I are really excited to talk with you all tonight for this big network-wide event called Prepare to Drive Change in the New Congress. We're really excited to talk about some of the opportunities that we see for major legislative change in 2021. And we're also going to highlight some of the most powerful ways that all of you around the country can take action to drive change in this new Congress. So first, I want to start us off with a query, just as we're all settling in. I know we still have folks joining us. We're at about almost 100 people here on the line. So let's start off with a query, and I'm going to ask Justin to put this in the chat as we go. So if you're calling in by computer or tablet, feel free to type your answer to this query in the chat. If you're calling in by phone, just take a moment to write your answer down so you can reflect on the question with all of us. So the query is, what is an issue that you really want Congress to address in 2021? Now repeat that. What is an issue that you want Congress to address in 2021, in the new year? Let's take a moment, let's take a Quaker moment of silence. We'll sit with this query and I'll repeat it again. As you write down your answer, type it into the chat, and then I'll read off a couple of the answers that we have there. So again, that query for folks calling in on the phone is, what is an issue you want Congress to address in 2021? All right, I see a lot of wonderful, amazing responses coming in. We've got global warming, green energy, protecting democracy, poverty and income inequality, gun control, turning military funding into health, education, and childcare support. Amazing. Endless war, especially in Yemen and Syria, racial justice and police reform. Let's see, lack of cooperation in government, human rights, pandemic relief, on and on. We've got a lot of work to do. And we're really excited to be doing it with all of you. These are really powerful answers. It's incredible to see the breadth of the work that we do at FCNL, both as an organization and as a grassroots network. So thank you all for putting those answers in the chat. And feel free to continue to type your answers and questions as they arise in the chat. So before I really kick us off and turn it over to Ashley Wilson for this kind of briefing part of our call, I wanted to give a quick overview of how the next hour is going to run. We're going to start off with this briefing from Ashley about the outlook for the 117th Congress and the legislation that we think has a real opportunity to advance at the start of 2021. She's going to give us the lay of the land, the big picture. Then we'll have some time for Q&A with Ashley, both by typing in the chat and by unmuting yourself to ask some questions. So feel free to type your questions as we go. And we'll address as many as we can. We'll see how much time we get. I'm then gonna take the reins a little bit, and I'm gonna share some of the ways that you can connect with FCNL's grassroots work. And we'll also have some time for questions about that work. That's lobbying, that's taking different kinds of action, connecting with advocacy teams. We'll talk about it all. And then before you sign off this evening, we're gonna ask you to commit to taking action with FCNL in the new year and to drive change in the new Congress. And we're going to follow up to stay connected with all of you to take this advocacy forward. So we're really excited about continuing the conversation in January and continuing this important work together. So now without further ado, I want to turn it over to the superstar, Ashley Wilson, who's our Grasstops manager at FCNL, to kick us off. Thank you so much, Ashley, for being here.
Thank you, Sarah, and everyone who is on this call on a Wednesday night in December to talk about next year after what a year we've had. So as Sarah said, my name's Ashley Wilson. I am FCNL's Grasstops Advocacy Manager. What that means is that I work with constituents who either have or are building close personal relationships with members of Congress. So if your member of Congress sees your face and knows your name, I would love to know about it. If they're chief of staff or and if any of them, see your face, know your name, I would love to know. And if they don't yet, that's great as well, because at FCNL, we believe that everyone has the potential to become a grass top and build that relationship with Congress. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking first about what the new Congress is going to look like. As we all know, a new session of Congress starts on January 3rd, 2021. What makes this year or this upcoming year different than normal is that we won't actually know who has the majority in the Senate until after the Georgia runoff elections on January 5th of 2021. The consequences of that mean that we won't know until after the results are in if Senator McConnell or presumably Senator Schumer will set the schedule and be in control of what bills are brought up for votes and when. But here's what we do know. Whether the makeup of the Senate is 50-50 with a Vice President Kamala Harris as a tiebreaker vote, or if the makeup stays at 52-48, Republicans to Democrats and independents, it's a pretty even split between the parties. Most bills in the Senate require 60 votes to pass. So we aren't looking at a scenario that we've had in the past few years where bills can pass with a party line vote plus one or two members from the other party. No matter which party controls the Senate, we're going to need a sizable bipartisan majority to get anything through the Senate for a vote. Now, in the House of Representatives, while not much has changed in terms of party control, the margin of Democrats to Republicans is a little bit narrower than it has been the past 2 years. So even if you read in local headlines or hear about a few new members of Congress who, on either side of the aisle, who seem to be more partisan, the reality is that 2021 is shaping up to be a year where, in order to get anything done at all, it has to be done in the most bipartisan manner possible. For FCNL's style of advocacy, this is pretty good news. It affirms that bipartisan work is more important than ever, and it reminds us that no member of Congress should be written off. Every last vote will matter. And it's especially true for an organization like FCNL that works on both domestic and foreign policy issues. A lot of what we work on often aren't party line votes anyway. There's also a piece of good news that laws that are passed with high levels of bipartisanship have longer staying power. They're less likely to be overturned when there's a shift in control of the White House or Congress because it has bipartisan support and it won't become something that one party or the other seeks to overturn immediately when they're in control or they're in power. So what does this mean for some of the legislation that we seek? A new session of Congress means a clean slate for legislating. All the bills from the 116th Congress need to be reintroduced for consideration in the 117th Congress. There's often talk about the first 100 days as some of the most powerful time for legislating. And we think that the window this year, even up to the August recess, is going to be a really exciting time to make progress on a lot of issues that have been on hold in prior years. So early 2021 is a good time for your member of Congress to hear from you about what your priorities are, because that's when they're going to be setting their own priorities. You can revisit opportunities for them to co-sponsor bills build a new relationship with the staffer who handles those issues. There is some shuffling that might happen among staff, either switching jobs, going from Congress to the administration or vice versa. And it's a good time to reacquaint yourself with those folks. And also ask for some of this valuable insight about if and when the new Congress plans on addressing any issue that you're passionate about. If you want your member of Congress to address something, they need to hear it from their constituents, because otherwise they're going to be paying all their attention to the stuff that they're getting phone calls and meeting requests and emails about. They are here to serve constituents, and they're going to listen to their constituents, which is why if you want them to do something, they need to hear from you. So Sarah is going to go over some specifics for action in greater detail later in the call, but I want to highlight a few pieces that we're really looking forward to in the early days of a new Congress. First is COVID and the economy. Even with a vaccine in sight, the effects of the pandemic aren't going to go away anytime soon. A sad reality is that during the pandemic, the wealthiest in our nation got richer. The 614 billionaires in the United States grew their wealth by a collective $931 billion, while more than 11 million people are currently unemployed. There are bipartisan common sense solutions that would make a huge difference in addressing economic inequality for the pandemic and beyond. One of the solutions we're looking at is expanding the earned income tax credit and child tax credit. Right now, there are low income workers who are being taxed into poverty because they're ineligible for the earned income tax credit. And some low income families who aren't receiving the full child tax credit, even though wealthier families are able to. I know when we talk about economic measures like taxes, it can seem super overwhelming, but the important thing to know is that these are relatively small tweaks to some of our most successful programs, and they already have bipartisan support from current and former members of Congress, from Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Senator Marco Rubio. Another issue is ending endless war. Over the last 2 years, congressional support to repeal the 2002 Iraq Authorization for the Use of Military Force, or AUMF, has grown thanks in large part to the work of FCNL and our advocacy teams. With Republican and Democratic champions in the House and the Senate, we believe that 2021 is the year that we can see Congress reclaim their constitutional authority and take this law off the books. The 2002 Iraq AUMF is no longer needed for existing operations. It's no longer relevant, and taking it off the books now will prevent abuse by future administrations. FCNL constituents have played a huge role in moving the needle on this issue over the past several years. And if this is something that you're interested in, it would be worth joining up with an FCNL advocacy team to really make an impact. And Sarah will talk more about that a little bit later. The third thing that we're really looking forward to is the Violence Against Women Act and strengthening tribal jurisdiction. We're really hopeful that because President-elect Biden feels so strongly about VAWA, we will see movement in early 2021. In 2013, Congress passed a VAWA that allowed tribal governments to enforce criminal jurisdiction over non-natives who committed domestic violence against Native Americans on tribal lands. And it was a great first step. And we wanted to build on that success in the 2019 reauthorization of VAWA, but it fell on the partisan chopping block. So we need to make sure that our senators and representatives understand that tribal authority to prosecute crimes that occur on tribal land is a high priority, and that people of faith and non-Native advocates also feel an urgent need to address the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. The fourth issue is police reform. So FCNL just had an incredibly successful virtual lobby day during our annual meeting and Quaker Public Policy Institute. More than 600 people attended 231 virtual lobby visits to share that police reform was a priority for the coming year. Whether you are part of that group or not, January is a great time to revisit that issue and check back in with your member of Congress, because they just heard from hundreds of FCNL constituents on this issue, and we want to keep up the momentum. So We know that we can't wait for thousands of police jurisdictions to make individual change. FCNL's really focused on 4 discrete areas where we think that Congress can make bipartisan reform nationwide. Limiting the 1033 program that transfers surplus military equipment to local police forces, prohibiting law enforcement from racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling, banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants, and raising the use of force standard to require de-escalation techniques and prevent use of lethal force until all non-lethal methods have been exhausted. So I don't want you to feel too overwhelmed with all those, as we say in DC, wonky details that I just shared. And the good news is that for all of you who want all the latest on these issues and more, I want to share that literally today, this afternoon, FCNL launched a new website that is a treasure trove of information in a new and easy to digest format. So I invite you to make sure that you check it out. Know that you can always reach out to Sarah or me or any of our colleagues if you have questions about these issues or any others. This was not an exhaustive list of all that FCNL is working on. I just wanted to share the 4 that I'm really pumped about for the first 100 days. And whether you're fired up about one issue in particular or all of FCNL's issues, I'm certain that we can find a way to work together, build a relationship with your elected officials' offices, and help shape that world that we seek for 2021. Okay, I know I shared a lot of information with you, and I hope this gets you excited. And I think we're going to spend some time taking some questions right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley, for this presentation. It was so interesting to hear all of these details and these updates. We have some questions in the chat. I encourage other folks to put questions in the chat. I'm going to pass off the first question I saw to Ashley, which was from Alan Willinger, which is, which Senate votes require a majority and which Senate votes require 60%?
Oh, this is a good question. I can tell you off the top, right off the bat, that the things that typically need 51 votes and not a 60 vote majority are related to the budget reconciliation process and some, I believe, confirmations, right? Like all the different confirmation votes that the Senate will be taking to confirm new cabinet secretaries. FCNL doesn't weigh in on nominations. It's part of our extended philosophy about not endorsing folks. But if you hear like the tax bill in 2017 that got pushed through, or the Affordable Care Act, those have been votes that needed only 51 votes through that budget reconciliation process. But I'll just leave it at that rather than go down the rabbit hole, because even that gets to be too complicated that I have to go to Amelia Keegan on our team and get her to explain it to me, because sometimes it just gets extra confusing even for me.
Thank you, Ashley. We had another one. Let's see, Jeannie Smith put a question in the chat, which was, let's see, what can be done if the Senate leader won't bring bills to the floor?
Great question. There is a process called a discharge petition that has been used in the past to force a bill to be brought to the floor. But the problem with that is that it still requires, I believe, 60 signatures from 60 senators to get a bill to be brought. So they don't often get the large portion that they need. And actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm wondering if that's only a thing in the House of Representatives and not in the Senate. So I apologize, and I will follow up with you if that's not true, because now I'm second guessing myself. The reality is that, right, part of the difficulty is that in the past 2 years, if Senator McConnell doesn't want to bring a bill up to the floor, he doesn't have to. So the way that I would respond to that then is bipartisanship is the way forward, right? Like Senator McConnell is only going to bring up a bill if it has the majority of his party supporting the bill. So the best thing that we can do is work with Republicans and Democrats, no matter who is in charge, to make sure that it is something that will pass with a strong bipartisan majority, whether that's Senator McConnell or Senator Schumer. Doesn't matter really, as long, you know, we really want these bipartisan solutions is our theory of change.
Thank you, Ashley. One thing I wanted to add, because Ruth put a question in the chat, what about climate change? This is so important. One of the things that I'll add is that, as many of you know, FCNL works on about 12 different legislative issues. And at any given time, we have an updated, what we call an ask. So a very specific thing that you can ask your member of Congress to do on that legislative issue. These are all getting newly updated now for the new congressional session. You can go on our new website, which has the same old URL. So it's still fcnl.org, but it's a new design. You can go to fcnl.org/issues. That's one of the places you can find action alerts where you can take action on any issue. So we just picked 4 things that looked likely and had a big opportunity for a piece of legislation to move right out of the gate, but there's a lot of opportunities. So this is just kind of a selection. I wanted to offer a chance for folks to raise their hand to ask maybe 1 or 2 questions verbally, especially for folks on the phone. If you're calling in by phone, you can raise your hand virtually by pressing *9. So you can press *9 to raise your hand and I'll call on you. You can also, if you're here on the tablet or on the computer, you can go down to the bottom of your screen, that little toolbar, you'll see the participants tab, and you should see something pop up on the right-hand side to raise your hand. So if you want to ask a question by unmuting yourself, just raise your hand and then we can pick on a couple of folks to ask questions. You can also put more questions in the chat. I see a lot of good questions coming in and a lot of issues that are really important that people are concerned about. Okay, I see Gracia Valliant. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. It looks like you're still on mute, Gracia. Let me see if I can unmute you. There you go.
Okay. I had a relationship with a staffer in Representative Hollingsworth's office on immigration. I work on immigration issues in my community. I have never, ever been successful in actually getting him to understand or respond directly to me. I get this, the reason I called and got this staffer was that I get the same letter every time. I had the letter memorized. And he continues to do that. No matter what happens, I get the same letter back. And it's really frustrating. And so, and both my senators are very, as you know, conservative. And they're difficult to move. So what do you recommend in that situation? Well, I mean, I've tried and.
Yeah, that is a great you and I feel that pain. You know, I live in DC now, but I didn't for my entire life. Here's what I really appreciate about FCNL is that there are a lot of issues and FCNL really seeks to find those bipartisan solutions. So on immigration, sometimes what I like to talk about in terms of going into Republican offices to talk about immigration is starting from a common ground of like a solution for the kids that are here, right? Or whether that is the news stories about kids in cages or young dreamers, because that is something that has bipartisan support already. With COVID, another solution where we've been doing a lot of bipartisan work on is a lot of mixed status families right now did not receive the stimulus check payments from the CARES Act earlier in the year. And the members of Congress, the members of the Senate that are actually leading the charge on trying to fix that are Senator Tillis from North Carolina, Senator Rubio from Florida, and Senator Daines in Montana have all had, you know, it's not necessarily what I would write if I were writing that legislation myself, but it's refreshing to be able to even go into a House office and say, a member of your party in the Senate introduced this bill. would you be willing to talk about it in the House, or something along those lines. So I always try to find the lowest hanging fruit. As far as not responding to your message or sending you the same form emails multiple times, I'll just share, I worked with a constituent in Iowa who sent a personalized email to the staffer who worked on the Violence Against Women Act. And he got a form message back. He sent it to one of his Republican senators. And he got a form message back, and he replied back to the staffer and said, "Thank you so much for letting me know what you share with your constituents. I'll be sure to share it with my friends so that they know what your messaging is. But like, I'm looking for a more detailed conversation, and I'd like to bring FCNL's policy expert in. Are you available to meet with us to discuss this?" And he got a response back right away that was like, "Oh, yes, like we'll do that." So if that's something that you're running up against, Sarah, I would be happy to work with you to see if there's a way that we can sort of loosen some stones that way.
Thank you, Ashley. These are great questions. I want to take one more question verbally from Kathy Albert, if we could, Kathy, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, hi there. Thank you so much for this time together and sharing so much information that we can act on. I just need to have someone repeat the 4 aspects of police reform that we're seeking. I know I've got limiting transfer of surplus military equipment, prohibiting chokeholds, raising standard for use of force, but there was one other that was prohibiting something, and I need that.
Yeah, and Justin can hopefully drop a link to our Leave Behind in the chat that has all 4 of those spelled out. So it's limiting the 1033 program, which transfers military equipment to local police forces, banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants, raising the use of force standard, and banning racial, religious, and other discriminatory profiling. And Justin just linked that in the chat as well. And the great news about that is that's what I mean when I say for those of you who had an experience at FCNL's annual meeting, a lot of us, because of it was at the end of Congress, you already knew if your member of Congress supported the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or didn't, right? And that was the overall bill. But I heard that there were some constituents who went into offices that didn't support the overall bill, but had really valuable conversations about one or all of those 4 policies of, are you with us on this? Are you with us on this? And then same thing, even to the question of what do you do if your member always agrees with you? It gives you an opportunity to go into that office and say, I know you're a co-sponsor of this bill, and I'm so grateful. Where else can we get the limit to the 1033 program? Can you work to add it into the National Defense Authorization Act? Is Congress considering a smaller bill to just move one piece of this big thing forward? And I would say that is super valuable intel that then you can share back with FCNL that makes our lobbyists way more equipped, and also helps with some of that, why would this staff person want to meet with me? Because they already agree with me. It's not just about convincing them, but it's about that timeline. How can we help? Can we talk to other people for you? Can we bring in other stories for you for committee hearings? Building a relationship to sort of see how you can how both of you can help each other achieve the things that you want.
Thank you, Ashley. So these are really great questions. We have a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to try to roll into my responses when we do a Q&A after this next piece. And feel free to keep typing your questions in the chat as we go. I'm going to pivot us a little bit now to talk about, so there's a lot of opportunity. It's been a tough year. It's been, probably the toughest year. And there's a lot of work that we're really hopeful and excited about getting to do in 2021. And as you can tell from the stories that Ashley's sharing and some of the information that she's given us, FCNL wants to partner with all of you to take action together and find a way forward, no matter who your member of Congress is, No matter whether you're feeling really frustrated about the relationship or lack of relationship with their office, whether you feel the way that I sometimes feel. I live in Massachusetts, and I saw someone put this in the chat where you think, you know, what's the point of reaching out? They agree with me on everything. We want to be able to talk that question through with you, no matter who your member of Congress is, because whoever they are, it's really important that they hear from you in the new year. And we can help you figure out the most effective way to engage with them and to do this kind of advocacy on any issue that you care about as part of our broader grassroots network. So one of the most, as many of you know, as you've heard me say probably 1,000 times, if you're part of an advocacy team or if you've been part of one of our trainings before, one of the most impactful things that any person can do to influence the decisions that are made in Congress is to arrange personalized meetings with your member of Congress or their staff. This is what you hear us call lobby visits. It's really just having a phone call or a Zoom call, now that everything's virtual, with a congressional staffer or your member themselves. This is surprisingly easy and accessible to us, even during this time of a pandemic when we're all, many of us, stuck at home doing everything virtually. This is something that you have access to as a constituent. You can reach out and request a meeting with the office in January when the new term starts. There are a lot of ways to do that. You can just reach out through their website. You can call their office. You can go to fcnl.org/Congress, which Justin's going to put in the chat. And you can click staff lookup and find the scheduler for that office. So if you want to actually schedule your own meeting, you can do that by contacting their scheduler directly. It's really important to find other people who can do this advocacy with you as well, because as constituents, by scheduling these meetings and bringing other people into the advocacy work with us, we're showing that we are more organized and that we care about these issues at a much higher level. So if you can find 2 other people to join your call or your Zoom meeting, your video call with the office, then you can start demonstrating to your member of Congress that constituents in their district care about this issue at a higher level, that they're organized, that they're dedicated enough to really take this higher level of action. And the really good thing about the fact that you're here on this call is that FCNL is providing a lot of resources and a ton of support for people who want to do this kind of deeper advocacy work by trying to really connect with those offices and find some way to drive their decisions in the coming year on the issues that you really care about for peace and justice. So I wanted to share a really quick story. I'm going to keep it really quick, but something that happened recently that I thought would maybe inspire some of you to take this action and kind of share from my own experience. And it kind of illustrates why this is so effective. Why is constituent advocacy, this kind of lobbying, so much more effective than other things you can do, like making phone calls and writing letters and signing petitions? And this is also for those of you who might think, well, what's the point in lobbying my member of Congress because they always agree with me or they never agree with me? I think a lot of people feel like they fall into that dichotomy. And maybe you feel like you fall more into one side of that dichotomy after this year's election. So this story is kind of a good example of something that you can do to navigate that. In October, I joined a Zoom lobby visit with the Boston advocacy team because I live in Boston. We were asking Senator Warren's foreign policy staffer to support what we call a Dear Colleague letter. So a letter put out by a member of Congress asking their colleagues to sign on in support. We were asking them to support humanitarian relief in countries facing US sanctions during the COVID-19 pandemic. And, you know, we were kind of talking beforehand and we thought, well, should we schedule the meeting? Because Senator Warren, you know, is really good on a lot of the issues that we care about. And we just, you know, it feels kind of redundant because she's often on the same side with us of this issue, at least. But the next day after our meeting, FCNL heard from Senator Warren's staff that she was joining the letter as the lead Senate co-sponsor of this Dear Colleague letter for humanitarian relief during COVID-19 of countries affected by sanctions, specifically because of our group's meeting. That's the reason that she cited in coming on as the lead Senate co-sponsor, or the lead senator on the letter, excuse me. This gave the letter a lot more weight and a lot more power, and it kind of brought a lot of influence behind an issue that was really critical at that time. And it was just because a group of 6 or 7 of us called her staffer on Zoom, shared our stories, talked about why it was important to us, and it took 20 minutes out of the day. It also only took about a week to set up that call, partly because we'd been in touch with him in the past, but partly because we just knew how to reach out and that we could request that meeting as constituents and share our concern. So this is the kind of lobbying that FCNL can really help you to do. We can show you how to do it. We can kind of walk you through the process for those of you who might be doing it for the first time. And for those of you who've done it for a long time, if you're part of an advocacy team, if you've been to annual meeting in the past, if you've lobbied with your Quaker meeting or another group, your faith group, we can also help you figure out the most strategic legislative ask to bring to your member of Congress based on where you live or based on your community, based on something that's coming up in Congress right now, like Ashley was talking about. There are two things I want to share, and I see that there's a hand up. So we're going to get to questions in a couple minutes. Two things I wanted to share about, especially for those of you who might be new to this kind of constituent advocacy work. There are two things that can make your advocacy as a grassroots advocate much, much more effective. And it's something that we can help you to develop, but these are the really basic pieces of an effective meeting with a member of Congress or their staff. The first, again, is what we call the ask. And that just means that if you have a meeting scheduled with a member of Congress, with one of their staff, you want to have one clear, specific thing that you're asking your member of Congress to do. And that means to keep it to one issue that you care about and find something very specific that you can ask your member of Congress to do about that issue. So if you come in and you say, the staffer gets on the phone with you or on the Zoom call with you and you say, here's a list of 10 things I care about. All of them are extremely important to me and I want you to take action to support all of these issues. It's less likely that they're going to take action on any of those issues because it's not specific enough. But the other thing is to figure out exactly what you want them to do about it. So you can join a call and you can say, I care about children. I want you to defend children's rights and stand up for children's rights. Depending on who your member of Congress is, they can interpret that in a lot of different ways. There's so many ways that we can advocate for children's rights. So what you want to do is figure out something very specific that you want them to do about that particular issue, whether it's co-sponsor this legislation or come out, make a statement of support for this piece of legislation. Or if they're not that supportive, if you don't think they're really going to come on as a co-sponsor, you could at least ask them to meet with more constituents about an issue or to hold a town hall about something or to really find time to meet with more constituents to hear more perspectives in their district, even if you don't think that they're going to take the action that you want them to take. It's kind of a scale, right? Depending on if they're a really strong supporter or an opponent, there's still something that you can ask them to do no matter what. And lucky for you, FCNL has this team of lobbyists working on Capitol Hill to come up with a very specific legislative ask on all of these issues based on what we think is most likely to move in Congress that we really believe in, that kind of carries our values forward. And you can find those one-page documents with a clear ask that you can give to your member of Congress on our website, which I think Justin can help me by dropping that link in the chat like he just did. So that's the ask, right? That's really important. And you'll hear us talk ourselves hoarse about how you have to have a clear ask. It's so critical to having an effective meeting. And the other thing you'll hear, again, for those of you who've been to trainings before, this is really familiar to you. But the other thing that we really tell people, especially when you go in to have a meeting with your member of Congress or their staff directly, is to think of a story from your own life, your own experience about why this issue matters to you. And it's counterintuitive because a lot of us think of going in to meet with a congressional staffer and it's a little intimidating. You kind of think that you need to go in with all of your facts and figures and your statistics, and you've got to be the policy expert. So people do a lot of research, they bring books, they bring a lot of articles, they suggest the staffer does more research on the issue. What you really need to do is not to fixate on being the expert on the policy, because we can always have a lobbyist follow up and answer policy questions for that office or that staffer. But you as constituents and us as constituents, you are the expert in your own story and the story of your community about why this issue matters to you. You can humanize these big abstract policy issues through your own lived experience. And that's an extremely powerful way to make these issues resonate more deeply in congressional offices and to really move the needle, whether it's the experience of your community during the COVID-19 pandemic, or how another issue has affected you personally, or your life, or your values as a person of faith, or anything like that. You're really trying to use that story as a time to connect across that feeling of division that you might have, or to find a shared experience that you can draw upon to develop that relationship with the congressional staff. So I know, again, this is a lot of information. What I want to do is to tell you 2 different ways that we're hoping you'll take action after this call. And we want to partner with you to do that in January. So how can you put all of this into practice, all this information that you're getting thrown at you tonight? We want you to do 2 things. The first is to submit a meeting request to one of your members of Congress to schedule a call, a lobby visit with them in January with their office. We hope that you'll commit to making that meeting request and to having that meeting in January so we can really hit the ground running. And if you've got questions, you can ask us. We're going to put our contact information in the chat, and we'll send a follow-up email tomorrow with more ways that you can get a 30-minute training with me in January before you have that meeting. Reach out and schedule it, but then you can join me at one of those trainings in January. So I'll walk you through the actual process of having the meeting and making sure it goes okay. And the second thing, alongside scheduling your meeting, is we hope you'll start brainstorming and think of 2 other people you can bring on that meeting with you. And remember, it's all virtual. So as long as they lived in the same district or the same state, they can join you. They just have to join the Zoom call or the phone call. So start thinking of those people and reach out to those people and ask if they'd be willing to lobby with you and join a call with you in January. And again, we'll help make it happen. Like I said, we're going to send a follow-up email where you can let us know that you're committing to lobby your member of Congress, and we can help guide you through the steps of making that most effective. And then the second thing that I hope you'll do, and for many of you, you've probably already done this, if you're excited to take action with an existing group of people, if you're intimidated about doing it alone, as I always am, and especially if you're really fired up on the issue of endless war and US militarism, and how that issue affects a lot of different issues that we care about, from climate change and destruction of the environment to police militarism here at home. If you're really fired up about that, I hope that you'll consider joining our national network of grassroots advocacy teams all around the country. We have 120 teams or so, and we think we'll launch about 15 new teams in the start of 2021. I can help connect you with the closest team to you, a team in your state or in your district, so you can lobby with them when they have their next meeting scheduled, and you can join in this growing national network in 42 states around the country. And there are, of course, a plethora of other ways that you could take action with FCNL. You can support our young adult programs. You can join our silent worship every week for those of you who want to sit and worship with other people around the country. You can write letters to your member of Congress. You can publish in the media. And we want to partner with you in doing a lot of this work. So I'm going to pause myself there. And I think maybe Ashley could help me read out a couple of questions from the chat. And then we can pause and take a few.
Absolutely, Sarah. So one question from Mark Donovan is it more powerful to have a single contact with a representative with 5 constituents involved, or to have 5 individual contacts?
I think that's a great question. As far as having a lobby visit, I think Justin would probably say it's really good to bring those 5 people together so that you can all have a meeting, a shared meeting with each other. I think if you're going to write a letter to the office, you can each, of course, write your own letter. But having a meeting, it's really good to do it all together instead of just scheduling individual meetings with the office 5 in a row. It's really good to kind of join together and have 5 people in the meeting. And I think it's more likely that they'll take your meeting request and be responsive. If you say, there's 5 of us or there's 10 of us, we span all these different groups around the district or around the state, and we really want to meet with you. The bigger the group, I think maybe the more likely that they'll really be able to make time for that visit.
Yeah. And I don't know, Sarah, if this is a question that you want to take or if I should, but we got a couple of questions about what to do if you have a new member of Congress.
Ashley, I'm going to hand those to you.
Yeah.
You're the expert.
So good news, bad news. A lot of members of Congress hire campaign staff. So if you are someone who in your personal capacity got to know a campaign staff person because you were a personal donor or personal volunteer, it is worth reaching out to that person that you know, because they might be hired or they might be connecting you to, they might be able to connect you to someone who was hired. Some offices are hiring chiefs of staff and legislative directors now. But the reality is that a lot of new members of Congress are like sworn in at noon and get the keys to their office at 12:01. They really are, building the plane as they fly it, so to speak. So you might be able to get a request in January, or in December rather. I would probably suggest waiting until January and just keeping in mind, even if you're just contacting them with an email, you're not requesting a meeting, keep in mind that like a lot of staffing, 100% of staffing for most offices isn't done until March. That doesn't mean wait until March to reach out, but really try to find the balance of being persistent and like staying at the top of their email inbox, but also being really patient and respectful, because they're getting lots of messages all at the same time. I know that that's sort of a non-answer answer, but there were a couple of different questions, and FCNL is going to have more information on our website and an event probably in January specifically for the people who have new members of Congress and are interested in meeting with them. But that's the top line stuff. And then I think the other question we have is a hand raiser, or a hand with the hand raise, Nancy.
Go ahead, Nancy. You can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, I took part in the lobby day in November and visited my constituent virtually. Actually, it was his legislative assistant. And I learned something I thought was very important. He almost always agrees with me. I agree with him. And he is a co-sponsor of the Justice and Policing Act. And when I asked if they had heard from other constituents, I was told that they had heard a lot from other constituents, but it was all negative. In fact, he had even gotten death threats. He had had people marching in front of his home, and it was all against what he was doing. And the young woman said that he was even considering backing away and not prioritizing it because he didn't hear anything positive from anyone who was for it. And in the past, if I knew how he was going to vote and I agreed with it, I might call him after the vote and say thank you, but had never called beforehand to support what he was doing. So I just think that's very important for people to know and to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that, Nancy. I'll just chime in because I know some people here know that I used to work for Catholic Sisters and Sister Simone Campbell, who was on Thursdays with Friends recently with Diane Randall. And she has a saying about this that I always love sharing, which is even the choir needs practice. But, you might think you're preaching to the choir, but even the choir needs practice. And that's a philosophy that I like to take in with me when I lobby. It looks like, Sarah, we have one other hand raised. And I think maybe that's it.
Go ahead, Lizzie. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question for Lizzie Lesher.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I wondered if you could just let us know what you recommend for something that is time sensitive. So living in Oklahoma, the executions that are about to take place in the next few days, 2 executions at Terre Haute. I've been working in prison reform for a long time, and I really am losing my sleep about the fact that there is very little information out there for the public about who are these prisoners and what has happened to them during the 15 to 20 years that they have been waiting to be executed. And I wonder, with taking something like this that is very time sensitive, because the first woman is to be executed in January, is there anything that you recommend as an urgency?
Let me hand that to Ashley. Ashley, what would you say?
Gosh, well, I wrote down that you're from Oklahoma because we're always looking for folks from Oklahoma. You know, I think that what you shared is an important, in terms of FCNL and sort of the way we go about things with members of Congress, is that the sad reality of Congress is that it is really easy to spend all of your time playing whack-a-mole and just doing what is in the news, the headlines in the immediate future. And in the case, I think of some of these federal executions, unfortunately, I believe that lies more in the Supreme Court than in Congress, which makes things even harder. So I'm not an expert on that. That's just my base level understanding. At the same time, what you shared, I think, is a really powerful seed of a story, that to go in and to build relationships with your senators, with Senator Lankford, for example, to talk about why you care about this issue and to try and find some of that common ground on sentencing reform and on the death penalty and all of these different pieces could be really valuable. And it is hard, right? Like for me as a person of faith who considers herself to be an advocate, it's really hard to find hope in that long term, like the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice piece. But I think that's the best advice that I can share right now. And I would really love to follow up with you, Lizzie, to talk more about how we can work together in the future on this. I'll just question. I tried. Sorry, Sarah.
I can add to this also, Ashley, that I mean, on the one hand, we've got lobbying and scheduling meetings as a really powerful tool for the long-term relationship building. You can request meetings on shorter notice for things that are more urgent. It's not clear, you know, it's sort of up to every office whether they'll get back to you, but there are some more urgent ways that you can raise attention to things that are happening right now, which is, you know, publishing letters to the editor in the newspaper that name your senators and your members of Congress by name. That means it has to cross someone's desk in their office. Finding other people in the community like faith leaders or other folks sort of with a high profile, a larger network who could sign on to a letter with you, that kind of thing. So that's where we get more into the organizing frame of how can you show there's a lot of opposition to this and there's a lot of public support for the issue, you know, that's another thing that we can always help to brainstorm. And it may be more effective to take different avenues than a lobby visit.
Thank you so much.
Of course. So thank you. I know there's also other questions in the chat. I'm going to save the chat. I'm going to answer your questions if we didn't get to it already. And I'll be in touch because we are going to send a follow-up tomorrow. But before we break, I know we've just got a couple of minutes here, and I wanted to do something to kind of help us move forward by making this commitment to take action, and also to give you a way to let FCNL know what you want to do to take action to drive change in the Congress in the new year. So I'm going to experiment by doing a poll. And if you're calling in by phone, I think you won't be able to participate, but we can follow up with you after tomorrow. So those of you on the computer and on a tablet, you're about to see, let's see, a poll about how you want to take action in 2021 with FCNL. It's going to pop up in your screen. I really hope it works. Let's see. Okay, it should have popped up in your screen now. So this is going to ask you a couple questions. I want to lobby my member of Congress in the first 100 days. I want to connect with an advocacy team near me. I want to connect with an FCNL organizer about my next steps, and letting us know if some of these are issues that you're the most fired up about. All right. Is everyone seeing that poll? Okay, I see a couple people are seeing it. That's great. Wonderful. Now I know it's working. Awesome. And I think I can save the poll, and that way I'll know the best way to follow up with everybody. I see, let's see, we've got.
This is so fun.
Yeah, it's really fun because we can see the results. So I can see 14 people are going to lobby, 16, 17, 18 people are going to lobby, 20 people want to connect with an advocacy team. I'm trying to narrate it and it's not too successful. We'll see. We've got a lot of people who care about justice and policing. We've got 20 people who want to connect with an FCNL organizer about your next steps. That's me, by the way. So that's great. You'll hear from me. We've got 30 people who are going to lobby, 32, 34. This is awesome. And I see that Deb Fink just put in the chat that she's connecting with advocacy teams. Wonderful. That's great. I will definitely be in touch. I see that Kathy doesn't see the poll. That's okay. If you don't see the poll, I'm going to send you an email tomorrow with the exact same questions. So this is also for folks who registered for the event but didn't join us. As I mentioned, we had like 300 people register. So this is a good way for us to know how to plug you into this work in the new year. What's the best way to plug you in? All right. So I'm going to, let me try. I'm going to end this poll. Let's see if it worked. Okay. All right, everybody. So that, let's see, that was a little experiment. Thank you for bearing with us. We've got a lot of exciting opportunities that folks are going to plug into to take action. And I think I just saw one person raise their hand. Let's see, if you've got a question, feel free to put it in the chat. Let's do it that way. So I had one other thing I was going to do before we break. I have another poll. I'm really experimenting with polls these days. And this is about other ways you want to connect with FCNL. So not just how you want to take action, but how can FCNL stay in touch with you? What are some ways that you want to kind of support our work or connect to other parts of our programming? Let me see if I can figure this out. Okay, I'm going to launch this second poll. Okay, and this is asking you, so you can indicate here or you can let us know tomorrow in the follow-up. I want to take action with my Quaker meeting or my faith community. I want to support young adult programs. I want to donate to support FCNL's work. I want to receive FCNL's emails. I want to publish letters to the editor. That's a special one there for Ashley. She loves working with people to publish really strategic letters to the editor based on where you live and what issue is really important in your state, etc. All right, we've got, oh my goodness, so many people. We've got 20 people who are going to take action with their Quaker meeting. We've got 22 who are going to donate to FCNL's work, 20 who are going to get FCNL's emails. Let's see. We've got 5 people supporting, 6 people supporting young adult programs, and 20 who are going to publish letters to the editor. That's amazing. Okay. So let's see. If you haven't already voted, I'm going to end the poll now so that we can wrap up face to face without just looking at that screen. And what I want to do in our last minute here together, feel free to type into the chat something you're walking away with, something that you're carrying forward from this time together. And let's see, we'll be able to see those and kind of carry that with us in these last few minutes together. Ashley and I are going to stay on the line for a few more minutes. So if you really had a question that didn't get answered, we'll see how many we can take, but I want to leave a little space for that because I know there's a lot of folks here who are looking to connect in a lot of different ways. So for those of you who are joining us, who are here, and for those who listen to this recording in the future, I just want to wrap up this event by thanking you all for being here, for spending this part of your evening with us. We're really grateful to be partnering with you in this work and to be working with all of you to build this world that we seek together by driving change in Congress and in Washington. There are a lot of really exciting and powerful ways that we think we can move the issues forward that we care about in 2021. And we're really excited to work with all of you to get there. So I'll also leave a little space for Ashley if you want to say anything to close. And then we'll stay on the line and have a great rest of your evening, everyone. We'll be here for a few more minutes if you have other questions. Go ahead, Ashley, if you want to close this out.
I'll just say thank you. And I put my cell phone number in the chat and you can text me anytime. But seriously, it is a joy. I love working with FCNL constituents all across the country, and please don't hesitate to reach out if there's ever any way that we can be helpful to your work.
Can I ask about abolishing the Electoral College?
Yes, absolutely. I think, BJ, that I saw your question in the chat earlier. I know there was a question about how far that measure's gone in the past. Ashley, do you have any answers on that one?
I would just say that that is part of FCNL's democracy portfolio. And we'll see. I believe that part of that was included in the HR1 from 2018, and it'll be interesting to see what pieces of democracy reform Congress takes up in the start of the year. And the reality is that that's not something that we know for sure right now. But that's all the more reason to go talk to your member of Congress about it, right? Because again, that piece of they're going to move forward on stuff that they hear from their constituents about.
How can I talk to a Republican who supported Trump
on abolishing the electoral college? That is a great
any issue. Any issue.
Yeah, I think that Sarah, I know, is going to be doing a round of like follow-up phone calls. And it sounds like you two are going to have a really fun discussion about lots of different things and how to connect and move forward in 2021. Because we think that there are lots of ways to connect with Republicans on FCNL issues.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking that question. I see a lot of really powerful things coming through in the chat, different takeaways. Let's see, finding out your new representative's priorities. Does anyone else want to ask a question while we're here for a couple more minutes? So we got 43 folks on the line. This is really nice. So.
We have Michael Murphy is raising his hand physically. Michael, I see you over there. If you want to unmute.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask how to avoid burnout when dealing with all of these issues. Several of you have said it's easy to get overwhelmed. How can we who are taking this on not get overwhelmed?
Well, Michael, when you find out the answer to that, I hope you let me know. You know, I think the thing that is really true, and it goes to what I said earlier about whack-a-mole versus long-term stuff, is we don't have to do every single thing. And the good news is that FCNL works on so many issues, and we have lobbyists that are here to support on so many issues, that if you are fired up about one particular issue, go for it. And we're here to support you. The other piece that we didn't really go into detail on, but I would say it's my favorite thing to talk about, is if you're a person who supports everything that FCNL works on, or your member of Congress supports everything or nothing that FCNL works on, seeing what committee that they're on is another really good place to prioritize. Because if they're on a particular committee that works on a certain issue, they're going to have much more flexibility about amendments and writing legislation. And instead of being a group of, for Senate, for example, instead of being a group of 100, they're a group of 20. And so to take a look at that overlap is, I think, a really good way to avoid burnout, because it allows you to focus on building a relationship with one person and prioritizing and not having to do it all. And just, I have to remind myself that it's okay that I don't follow, I didn't follow anything about the impeachment because I just needed to focus on other stuff. So that's my advice. But if you have any other pro tips, let me know, because I'm still learning that too.
Lobbying with other people. Lobbying with other people gives you hope, because it's community and it keeps you connected to other people. And this is can be depressing and hard. And it's really important to draw on your community to kind of stay hopeful and stay engaged in the work and support each other, which is a good note for us to end on. So I saw a couple of people had asked for us to end with a moment of silence. As you know, FCNL is a Quaker lobby, so I would love to lead us in a brief moment of silence to center as we close out this wonderful event. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, everybody. Good night and go well, and we'll be in touch. And thank you all so much for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.